Well, hi everybody, and welcome to the third installment of our Futo podcast. Today, we're in full force. It's a full house. We want to really start where we finished last time when we talked with Luis here on the mobile systems and mobile security. And given the feedback that we've received, it's a sufficiently cogent topic that we want to expound on it. And so, Luis, why don't we take it from where we were last time and tell us a little bit about the graphene that we talked about and the Android systems, and then we have Charles talk a little bit about iPhone, and maybe Iron, you can cue us in on the overall mission of Futo and how this all ties in together. In other words, where are we heading and what do we want to achieve?
Yeah, and hopefully this will be a more looser conversation than we usually have. We're just going to banter about this stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the cool thing about GrapheneOS is that it allows you to decide how much Google you want on your phone, and it also allows you to essentially say, I am going to control how much access Google has on my device. So if you want no Google Play services whatsoever, which means, no push notifications and a lot of software, banking apps and lots of apps don't work, but you have no Google spyware, you have that. And if you want to have Google Play services and framework spyware on there, it'll be on there in a way where you can control it. So you can say, you don't get network access. You don't get access to other application data. You don't get access to my location. You don't get access to my sensors or microphone. So with a normal Android phone, Google Play Services is just a privileged app that can just do whatever it wants. On GrapheneOS, it's a normal basic app like everything else in the untrusted app SE Linux domain. So you can choose the permissions of what it does. So even if you are going to give it all these permissions, I still like the idea of using GrapheneOS because it gets users used to the idea, this is my phone. I'm going to say what goes on my phone. I'm going to say what permissions this application has. Just because it came from Google doesn't mean it's God and gets to see everything I'm doing on my device.
So let's talk about, let's not shill it too much though, right? Let's talk about why is it that, would we recommend this at this point? Is it good enough yet?
It depends to who. Yeah, there's in the larger scheme of things, if you're a normal user and you like your frills and security of an iPhone, and we'll dig into that in a minute. At this point, the Graphene operating system is wonderful, and we thank its creator for making it. However, it's really for technically advanced users. Let's not sugarcoat it. It's if you really get Google Play out of it, as I have, and you just have the raw stock GrapheneOS, the user experience is still there's room for improvement. It's the day-to-day life is still quite tough. For me, it's worth it because I really like that. I like that security and I like that privacy and anonymity. I really like it, but it's not there yet for the average normie user, as I would say.
The average user only has about 3 clicks to install Google Play stuff if they want. And even if they do install Google Play services, they can use all the other apps that they could before, but it's still just as it's not like you have to do anything in command line or crazy to actually be able to use it. And it still gives you a lot better security than what you get with stock Android. So you'll still be able to use your banking apps, but it's not going to be able to see what data is going, it's not going to be able to see what you're doing with your other applications.
True, yeah. No, it's a really cool system, right? But again, the starting point for the vast majority of users, and I presume that most of our users will be viewing this either in Europe or in the United States, their starting point to mobile experience is an iPhone, right? And probability is high.
Especially in the US, right?
In the US, yeah.
It's over 50% now.
Yeah. And so let's segue a little bit and sort of introduce this whole concept. Question is, what's wrong with an iPhone, right? It's a pretty cool phone.
Yeah,
it's got pretty cool security. What's
Yeah, it's one of these interesting cases where the shiny pretty thing is actually technically solid too, and has some legitimate advantages for real world stuff. So if you're concerned about malicious people sending you shady links or emails or whatever, trying to take over your device like in the Windows XP days, iPhone's pretty solid for that. It's probably the most difficult target in the world right now. iPhones and Chromebooks, right? You go to the places where I used to hang out, right? You go to Usenix Security Conference or IEEE Security and Privacy Symposium. You look around at what are all the top researchers in this field. What do they have in their pocket? Probably 80% iPhone. And so, right, because it is really good. It's like if y'all watch Car Wizard videos, right? It's a mechanic that, shows you what mechanics do looking under cars. And he's got an episode where he talks about like, what kind of cars do mechanics drive? And it's not like some souped up, like 69 Camaro. It's boring ass, just solid, workable, dependable cars that don't need any attention, that don't make you do your day job at night, right? And
do they pick cars they can't even like work on though themselves? I bet you they pick cars they can work on themselves.
Yeah, it was like like a Mercury Grand Marquis or something, right? Or a Camry, right? Like boring, not exciting cars that are standard, lots and lots of parts, easy to work on, and
yeah. So that's why I've always hated iPhone, because a programmer cannot do what they want on the iPhone without Apple's permission. Like, you can kind of like do some stuff with, their development system to get your apps on other people's phones, but basically to get in the App Store, they're going to like,
you pay a $99 a year developer license membership, whatever it is. You pay your $100 a year, and then you can make your apps installable on people's devices. But then you're right. If you want to, even where like your friends, to install your app, you got to go through the App Store, and then they have to do their review and decide that this is what they want to allow. And
I bet you, the people who are interested in kernel security, or like kind of like system security at the operating system level, they might be on an Android more just because they can program that. They can actually do like research on it and actually program it and try to improve things. Or is that not the case?
Yeah, I would imagine, but like it's a double-edged sword, right? And I mean, if you live inside the Apple ecosystem as a consumer, there are the guardrails around you are pretty tight. But they're also security guardrails. Yeah, they prevent you doing stupid shit.
Right, and so like as a developer, it kind of stinks, right? Because you have to go through these extra layers of scrutiny. But as a user, that's what I want, right? I don't give a crap if your life as a developer is harder. I want apps to be vetted. I want them, to pass a higher level of scrutiny, and I want it to be harder for nasty malware stuff to get on my phone.
This is like the pendulum swinging in the opposite direction from Windows XP Service Pack 1.
Where it was just like wide open, like
yeah,
do whatever
there was
you
a
want.
fair amount of sovereignty there with the website. What websites you go to, what you could see, what you could do, what you could install, and
And it was a disaster, right? It was like malware within 5 minutes of connecting to the internet, and grandma's PCs were like loaded down with so much junk they would hardly run. Yeah, and so you can kind of see the iPhone coming out in 2007. It's kind of like a reaction to that, right? The pendulum starting swinging hard the other way.
So that's the advantage, right? And, I was on an iPhone for quite some time, over a decade, and I appreciate the user interface and the ease of use. It is easy to use. You can give it to like a 2-year-old without any instructions, and it's magic seeing little children, how they learn how to just use
Supposedly
the iPhone.
like 50% of 2-year-olds in the US have their own iPad.
That's scary.
That's frightening, right? But it speaks to the usability of the device, right?
Right, but that said, that's an advantage. Okay, a secure operating system and secure vetted, a garden, basically a playground, a sandbox. That's as long as you stick to that sandbox, and you are sticking to that sandbox because there are 30-foot walls around that sandbox and you're not getting out of those. Apple's great for that. But from a conceptual standpoint, there's a problem with that, right? There's a problem. It's not really your device. Apple controls it completely. Even if you turn off iCloud, Apple's still in control. And I personally don't like that. Like, I want my computer to be just mine and answer to no one else but me.
I'm never going to forget like plugging it into a computer to try to transfer files to it. And I remember asking somebody, why doesn't it show up for me to transfer files to it? And he just started laughing. He's like, you haven't used one of these before, have you? This is like over 10 years ago, but it's just basic stuff like that. Like things that I would imagine would be simple. Every time it's something that I imagine would be simple when it comes to an Apple product, it's not simple because they've come up with their own weird way to do it by restricting things that I could do easily on almost any other device. It just drives me insane.
Even on Android, the file transfer wasn't super straightforward, right? I remember on Mac, you have to get the special Android file transfer app that would kind of sort of worked.
It uses MTP, which is not the best, but like I could plug it in on Linux, I could plug it in Windows.
Okay.
I haven't tried it on
That's
a Mac.
better than what
I mean, with the developer tool, like one of the things, like an Android phone, you can just click on developing mode, install the developer tools on your PC, and you have you can do it.
Off the races.
ADB push, ADB pull, you get whatever file you want onto your phone, off of your phone. You can do ADB screen record to record the screen from your phone. It's really nice. Yeah. And this is all like without having to, you can just go to Android Studio and like download the tools from Google. So that's why, as much as I don't like Google for a lot of the things they do that, mining people's data, they do a lot of nice things in terms of helping developers just get started without any kind of friction as a programmer on Android.
And you can use it on the hardware that you want. Like there are so many years of iPhones that have ridiculous failures, like the 6 Plus, where you tap the screen and it doesn't work because the Touch IC has bent off the board in the phone. iPhone 7, where you'll either stop getting audio or stop getting baseband signal because the board inside the case just bends for no good reason. Like every single year there'll be some weird design flaw, and it's not like you can buy an iPhone from a different vendor or a different manafacturer. At least you can kind of choose.
Was it the 4S? Which one was the one that Steve Jobs said you're holding it wrong?
The GSM one. They fixed that with the CDMA and the 4S.
To again play the devil's advocate, to look into the future, an ideal, platonic ideal of a device would be a device that has a completely open operating system, probably some kind of Android, AOSP, but that's just as delightful to use and easy and intuitive as an Apple, as an iOS. However, it doesn't come provided by Google or Apple. There's no logins when you boot up the device, or there's no login to some walled garden. And it's just awesome. And a 1-year-old can use it.
And it has a security aspect.
And it has a security aspect.
Apple gives you, right?
And that unfortunately does not exist. In my opinion. Now, in my humble, shill, trigger warning opinion, graphene comes really close. And I really like it, but it's still not there. It's just through no fault of the system, but there's a lot more work to make it as delightful and as completely seamless as an iPhone. And so that's part of our mission here, right? Is to help develop that kind of a operating system or an app store or a whole ecosystem.
Yeah, and a lot of our grants are going towards Android open source projects now, just because we see Apple as a dead end. The only way they're going to get better is probably legislation. We can actually still program Android devices, which is nice. Like Apple will forbid you from improving some of their software. They will just outright forbid you from programming a browser that can compete with Safari, for example. But Android, we can still program it. We still have a decent amount of control over those devices.
Well, anything on an iPhone, like any browser thing, still uses the rendering engine of Safari. Like there are no competing browsers.
I mean, if you want to get into the weeds, it's like you can allocate executable memory on Android. You cannot allocate executable memory on iOS. And you need to be able to allocate executable memory so that you can do the just-in-time compilation for the JavaScript on websites.
And there's other weird stuff, right? I tried to get one app on an iPhone like 3 years ago, and they really put you through the ringer, Apple. They regulate how many push notifications you can issue, how much battery, can it run in the background, can you do this, like they minutely review every little tiny aspect of your app and will like literally until they're happy to their own satisfaction. Your app's not getting on any iPhone.
Yeah, it's tough. Right. So one of the things that we're doing on my project is we want to build a secure encrypted photo gallery that lives in the cloud and that works across any type of device. And on the Android platform, it looks like we can go and we can find all the right API calls, find all the bits that we need in the OS, and build something where we can have this thing automatically sync your photos from your device off to your secure encrypted thing in the cloud, and it'll just run in the background and it's fine. On the iPhone, if we want to do that, there's not even a way to ask, as far as I understand right now. It has to be like interactive from the user. And I can kind of see both sides. I can understand why, as a user, probably most apps that would want to go and do that to my photos, I don't want to let them have it. But it stinks that it's impossible to build something that's not literally built into the phone that can do something like that, right? We want to have something that's nice and actually puts the user in control and doesn't spy on them and doesn't screw them. And we can't do it because I don't know if it's a tragedy of the commons type thing or if this is just Apple being a control freak or...
What's the specific thing that you're not allowed to do?
as far as I know, maybe I'm wrong on this. Maybe people can leave comments and correct me. But I don't think we can have something running in the background and automatically syncing the device photos.
Because of battery drain, right?
Probably that, but also just like it's an obvious sketchy thing that apps would do if they were malicious or right. And so
it sucks that you can't like allow the user to grant that permission to it if they wanted to.
Right.
We have to say no for you.
Right.
But I don't know if the user can opt out of if they're syncing their files to iCloud of the device, checking the hash to see if it matches known CSAM. Like the things that you are and are not allowed to opt in or out to on an iPhone.
Yeah, and that's, I guess we could really go off the rails. We could do a whole another discussion about the CSAM scanning thing from last summer.
Nah.
But let's avoid that for now. But
I think fundamentally that was like a storm in a teacup because other providers already do that. Like Google scans all your Google Cloud photos for what they deem to be criminal content. Right?
All the major providers, all the
this.
major cloud platforms are going to scan everything that you upload to them.
There was a good New York Times article a few months ago about a gentleman that had, like, during COVID, he couldn't make it to the doctor's office. So the doctor asked for a picture of his kid, and that got flagged as CSAM.
Kid had a rash in the private area, right?
And they said, well, wouldn't you be able to see the context that this person was asking a medical doctor? And Google's response was, and I'm paraphrasing here, was, well, that there was another picture 6 months earlier of the mother naked in bed with the kid, hugging the kid in the morning, and that they said, well, that set off everything. So the guy wound up dealing with the police over the course of a year to convince them, no, this is a medical picture. And this other picture that Google's talking about is literally my wife just sleeping with our baby, which it's just ridiculous.
You can't allow mothers to be unclothed around babies, right? What would happen then?
But like, yeah, it's not even just let's say the operating system like GrapheneOS or Calyx or Lineage or anything else. It's also the app ecosystem around it. If you're used to Google Photos and you say, okay, I'm going to view stuff in the cloud using Nextcloud, that's a serious downgrade in experience. I use Nextcloud on my device because I'm like, I don't want. One of the things that sucks here is that a lot of these operating systems only work on a Pixel, where you don't get a micro SD card slot, so you're stuck. Especially if you're somebody like me that has almost a terabyte of stuff on their SD card. So I installed Nextcloud and set up a server in my. It does not work the way Google Photos does. Not even close.
Is it just slow, or is it missing features, or?
It's just it's slow and it's
unstable.
Clunky and it's unstable, and sometimes I have to SSH into my server to restart.
You're your own sysadmin, right? So I mean, you running your own.
Yeah, like this is what Harpo would say. This is the price of freedom.
It's like running Linux in 2000.
Yes, this is where Harpo would come in and say that's the price of. But that is the price of freedom. And like a lot of Nextcloud, it's cool that Nextcloud is completely open source. Yeah. And it also kind of. There's some bugs in it that have been there since like 2017, and you'll see people comment and say, yeah, that thing with the whole calendar where I add something and it's always off by a few hours. Yeah, that sucks, but such is life.
But that's the whole history of tech innovation, right? Is techies using, knowledge and skills that have been hard won over years to do cool things. And then you can build a successful product by automating that and putting a nice user interface on it and giving that to normal people, right? Like, how long were Unix nerds keeping their email out in some remote server where it was always available for years before Hotmail was a thing, right? Because they were SSHing, or goodness, that was before SSH even, right? But telnetting to some remote mocks, and you could always get to your email because you could go read it in Pine or Mutt or whatever. And then the guys that did Hotmail decided that they were going to bring that to normies and change the world. So hopefully we can do similar stuff like that, right?
Yeah, like just making a lot of these projects not suck. Because even if the operating system is good, you don't want people going back to Google Calendar, back to Google Keep, back to Google Photos, because the alternatives are just half-assed and horrible. But if 99% of the people are using the former, then there isn't that incentive structure to make the alternatives as good as they need to be.
There's probably a whole nother video to be done about incentive structures in open source.
We had a great talk with KDE today.
Nice.
Great. That's one way to put it.
Because this stuff works like so well for like if you're going to build an operating system kernel, right? Like, look at Linux, like, most successful open source project maybe ever. If you're going to build a database, look at what Postgres does, right? Awesome. If you're going to build a web server, awesome. And these projects work and people contribute to them and they get better and better and better. And then you look at like the user-facing client stuff, and it sucks. That's too bad.
Yeah, no, and that's the problem. We have Apple and Google taking advantage of the fact that they did do that work right? And then they're doing things to us because we're kind of locked into their software now.
They said we're going to give you all this cool stuff for free. In exchange, we're just going to take your data and we're going to...
Yeah. Well, Apple said we're going to give you all this cool stuff for $1,000 every couple of years.
Yeah, and if you...
And an iCloud fee.
And yeah, 99 cents a month for...
Yeah.
And if something goes wrong with it, then just get another one. You're probably part of a small percentage.
And again, don't forget the 30% cut that they take from app developers. I mean, this is pretty egregious.
They're making about $4 billion a year.
Yeah. I mean, as you know, we want more people to start programming and creating great apps for people, and Apple will take a 30% cut from you. Google does the same thing. But if you want to go route around that with Android, you can. You can publish your own software on your own app stores. You can replay. There's alternative app stores that can exist on Android, and that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, like sideloading is something that I think is going to be made cool. This is probably segmenting into what we were talking about before, but hypothetically speaking, let's just say there was a very popular social media app that recently had minor changes to it, and and that millions of people use. That's no longer allowed on the App Store.
Hypothetically,
there has to be some sort of crossroads where people have to decide. Okay, am I going to be open to the idea of sideloading things, or am I going to say, well, Apple says this app is not okay, so I am just going to, listen to my overlord? There has to be that defining moment where people are essentially forced to make that choice. That might come
sooner than you think.
Yeah, I mean,
next in 3 days.
I mean, well, haven't we seen this happen? I mean, doesn't Apple do a lot of compliance with the Chinese government in terms of like doing actual real censorship of political thought?
I think anybody who does business in Apple, China does some major censorship.
And so the way Apple set things up with their strict control gives the governments a lot more control to do this political censorship.
Apple was actually even more duplicitous than that, because American law prevents them from directly working with dictatorial regimes like Chinese Communist Party. So they had to set up a subsidiary in China. So the actual data center, the Apple iCloud data center in China, is operated by a third party, not Apple. And when the Chinese government sends a request for censorship or for a particular user's data, they send it to the Chinese party, not to Apple. Which is the sneaky way how Apple gets away with basically violating their Chinese users' privacy.
Right. So Apple,
and they'll do it with no moral compunction. Like, they'll just do it.
Yeah, and they'll do it in America, like if the wrong people get in charge, or maybe they already have.
I mean, I think we should look probably to see this increasing around the world for a while. You have things like GDPR already. The EU has their own GDPR. Now the UK has a separate GDPR. Local governments are in charge of their jurisdiction, and they want to enforce what they say. We're going to see them flex those muscles more and more as we go forward. Some for good, some for bad.
Sure. But the beauty of technology is that you can design technology in a way that makes it very difficult for governments to clamp down or extract that or obtain that data. With end-to-end encryption devices that simply don't report to any cloud, or the cloud itself is self-managed, you deployed it and it's end-to-end encrypted. And unless someone comes to you and physically grabs you and does the $5 wrench test on you, give me the password, then the device needs to be yours, the software needs to be open and programmable, and the data needs to be physically yours, only on your device, and if you so choose, on a cloud that's deployed by you and end-to-end encrypted. In other words, data and computing sovereignty, yes, right? Yeah. So in normal English, how would you translate that? Sovereignty is a bit of a funny word. What would that mean to you, Aaron?
It's my computer. I know what it does. I can control what it does. Nobody else has more control over this computer than myself, if I choose to do that, or I can delegate that to other people, but I choose who I delegate that to. I can be my nephew, right? It can be some security, when you, like we say Apple provides great security as long as you're within their limits. Well, if I want great security for my home, I can choose from 5 different security companies. In Texas, I can just buy a bunch of guns and do it myself. With Apple, you are forced to use them for they kind of are running a bit of a security racket. In fact, I would say that's a very fair thing to say, that Apple is a bit of a security racket.
I'm less even bothered by the fact that they do this than the fact that people put up with it. I mean, like, the only reason that they're able to even take 30% from app developers and say, well, this is what you want if you want to still give software to our users, the only reason they're even able to limit what software goes in their device and all of that is because everybody has just kind of tolerated it and accepted it as normal.
Well,
We've all we get the software and the hardware that we as consumers deserve, in my opinion.
but hopefully we can get more people interested in, branching out and learning more about what their computer does. And hopefully more people decide to take control over their computers.
Yep. So if there's any 15 to 25-year-olds, boys or girls, who want to work on this, like if you want to be the cool kids who are not on social media, who have a computer that is answerable to only you don't have the blue check mark of iMessage, I'm afraid. But if you want to be the countercultural rebel and not have, instead of the Che Guevara t-shirt, you can have like sovereign computing t-shirt, then you come do an internship here at Futo, right?
Yeah, or start working on a project, apply for a grant. I mean, one thing to talk about too is just, a message to the engineers at Google working on the Android open source project. You guys are doing great. We love you. You need to throw a tantrum if anybody ever makes you do evil things. Like, just make sure you keep doing it right. Like, keep it open. We know that Google will never do the right thing with stock Android. Google will always be mining your data and selling behavioral modifications to marketers. But you're doing good work inside Google. So we appreciate you, and we appreciate that you're still allowed to do good inside Google.
This was an interesting point with a piece of news that came out a week and a half ago. So Amazon has some fork of Android on their Fire TV, and a lot of manufacturers did not want to make it because Google has these deals with manufacturers where if you produce a device that comes with Google Play services and framework and everything else, if you want it to come with our stuff, you cannot produce a non-conforming Android device, meaning if you can't sell like GrapheneOS or something like that on your device. And they can. And in India, they got smacked. It wasn't really it was like me getting fined 20 cents. But they got smacked by the government for antitrust. You're keeping companies from producing things. And one point that you made is Google is getting smacked for being half evil. Whereas with Apple, no other manufacturer can manufacture a device with iOS, and there's no open source version of iOS. So Google is getting smacked for being half evil, and I think they should get smacked for being half evil. But Apple doesn't get any punishment for being full evil.
Exactly, it's fucked up.
And the weird thing about this is that the engineer inside of Google that said, you know what, we should keep the Android open source project open. Like, whoever did that. The very fact that they made it open at all is what opened them up to this antitrust lawsuit. So that person that probably advocated for it to be kept open is the reason that they're getting fined in these countries. And it would really suck if they were looking at that engineer saying, see, that's why we should have followed Apple's model.
Yeah, and I guarantee you there are lawyers at Google who are like, God damn, these stupid do-gooder engineers, like, they caused us so many problems with the EU. And that sucks that happens. But you just got to keep, these battles are happening inside the companies too. Right? Like, there are good people at Google. As much as we think most Google engineers should quit tomorrow, few of you are still allowed to do good things, and we appreciate it.
That's like that Pareto principle thing where if you have 9 people at a company, 3 are doing half the productive work. But conversely, if you have 10,000 people at a company, probably 100 are doing half the productive work. And if that small percentage of people that do all the good work leave, the company is probably screwed.
I mean, you could argue that too. Yes. Yeah.
No, but the point is that small percentage of people can change the direction of things.
Right.
Like, if they say, if you do this evil thing, I will leave, they'll most likely listen to you.
So to conclude, guys, let's take the crystal ball and do a little prophecy, right? Imagine in 2006 you had to predict what 2022 will look like. It wouldn't be easy, but now in 2022, imagine what the 2040s will look like. Is it possible that there will be a vibrant marketplace, an actual choice in mobile devices, mobile operating systems, that there will be a viable alternative to the walled garden of Google and Apple in about 10, 15 years from now?
I think people will get tired of this, and there'll be some moment that winds up changing the industry. Like, just with the movie and the music industry, you were so limited in how you could get access to anything. And then there was that moment in 1999 with Napster and Kazaa and everything becoming popular that just was like a bomb, and it just winds up changing the entire way that we consume things for a long period of time. and then you eventually came up with streaming services and everything else. Like at some point, people are going to get tired of not having freedom. At some point, people are going to get tired of the fact that they're constantly spied on. Like what happened to that other gentleman that got accused of having CSAM on his device because he sent a picture of his kid to a doctor. Like that's going to happen to the wrong person at the right time, or something like a very popular social media app may get removed from an app store within the next couple of days or something like that. And people are going to wake up and realize, I want some freedom back. And I think that it has to get to that critical point. Like something has to happen that's horrible enough that your normal average everyday user decides, I want my freedom, I want my sovereignty, I want my privacy, screw all you guys. Until that happens, none of this is really going to change. And there's not going to be an incentive structure for it to get better.
Yeah, I think it's hard to predict far out into the future, right? Like in 2000, we thought like the year of desktop Linux is just right around the corner, right? It was always like, is this the year? No, that was not the year. The next year was not the year, right? Like none of those years were the year. This year is not the year. Next year is not going to be the year. But Linux is everywhere now, right? Like you can't do anything without like interacting with the Linux system now, right? And so Linux did take over the world. It just wasn't in the way that we expected. And so kind of, we're already in a world where these are a viable alternative, right? Like you're using this right now, and you can.
I love it.
Can you check your email on it?
Yeah.
Can you browse the web?
Yeah.
Can you like send messages to people?
Yeah.
That's pretty good, right?
Oh yeah. It does everything I need. It's just that the only thing it doesn't have is the iMessage blue check mark, and to a lot of people that's just like a crazy boundary. It's like, I don't want to look poor.
I didn't realize
green messages, you know.
I feel
like really that's all.
I'm so behind on this. I didn't know until last week, and this is embarrassing because I do this crap for a living. I didn't know until last week that if you use an Android phone, it makes the color of your text message box show up differently, and that people use
just
this
for one
as a
person. It
status
makes
symbol.
it for everyone. If there's a whole group, it's like an infection.
Yeah, no, it's sad.
funny. If there's
high
an
schools
infection,
in high schools, like at Westlake High here, you're considered a pariah if you have a green check mark.
Because if there's 7 people, look, if there's 7 people in an iMessage group and all 7 are iMessage, it's blue, right? It's sufficient for one person to be on an Android, and it turns the whole group green.
Because the whole conversation gets sent over the traditional cell network.
Yeah.
Over
And everyone says, ew.
But like this is a status symbol. This is actually a status symbol. That's disgusting.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
This
Of
is
course
so,
it's a status
that is
symbol.
so stupid.
You finally get it, Luis. Okay, yes, it is a status symbol, and that's why
But of all the
iPhones
things-
cost $1,000.
Of all the things to have as a status symbol, like I paid more money for a device that's more difficult to fix, more difficult to maintain over the load. Like,
yes,
that
that's
controls
the point.
me. The status symbol is I have a different color in my texting checkbox.
Yes.
That's fucking dumb.
Yes.
But does it? But hold on,
that's life.
hold on a minute. Like, so in reality, right? For non-technical people, does an iPhone really constrain them that much?
No.
Versus some crap $200 Android that they get from their carrier that's like super locked down.
No.
It has like crapware that you can't uninstall.
No.
So like the reality, right? They're making a rational choice given the options that they have.
It is, but like you make the rational choice, sure. But do you actually want to do little things that can help move us on the path to having more control over our computers and stuff like that?
Yeah, we want to shift that rational choice.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's just even telling people, when I tell people, it's like, look, this thing is not Google and it's not Apple. They're like, wow, I didn't know that thing existed. I'm like, yeah, it exists. There's a life outside of Google. And there's life outside of Apple.
It can suck though. Like we're not getting.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me.
Not like how do you? I'm just curious. How do you deal with not getting notifications until you open a program?
So actually, it's a big myth. There are notifications even without Google Play, right? So on Signal,
Some apps like Signal does it properly.
Signal has its own notification server and works flawlessly.
Yeah, for every one app that does that, there's like 50 that don't.
And you gotta switch your sort of mindset, right? I don't want notifications because I don't need to be notified about every single email. That's one. The only notifications I actually need to get are Signal notifications because those are high importance.
What does that do to your dating life though? Like
I don't have a dating life.
No,
I'm
like,
married.
baby, I wasn't ignoring you. I use GrapheneOS. Like,
No, look, dude, I get even weirder, right? I don't do text messages at all. So if you want to text me, you have to get on Signal.
So I'm a lead. So you have to get on my level in order to talk to me. I like
Correct. No, I'm like, there's no way. People are like, what's your phone number? I'm like, I don't have one. They're like, what do you mean you don't have one? I have a SIM card that just says data, has no phone number. They're like, what do you mean? It's like, there's no phone number.
Don't you have to have a phone number for
Nope.
Signal?
Like there's some organization that I'm stuck using a Slack channel for. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, you have to. Yes, you do need. So okay, then you can escalate the conversation. It's like, okay, there are forks of Signal that don't use phone numbers, right? So for my high security friends, high paranoia friends, I'm like, okay, screw phone numbers. Like, I'm not giving you my email. I'm not giving you my phone number. Forget that. You can scan a QR code on my device and I'll scan your QR code, and that's how we're going to communicate. So that's, I think, Session. The app's called Session. It's available on iOS too. It actually wonderfully works across Android and iOS, one of the few. And there's no phone, there's no email, nothing, no name. It just sends messages over this kind of weird fork of the Tor protocol. It's really cool. You know, we need it's shifting mindsets more than shifting technology, in my view. I mean, I know it's software for you, but a lot of it is like the way the user approaches that. We've been conditioned over 20, 30 years that every website is username, password. No username, no password, no email, no phone number. No, just a QR code and a 12-word backup for your private key, because it's public key cryptography, right? And,
Right.
And it's the future's bright. I really believe so.
I mean, I hope so. Like, Futo will have failed if it's not bright, but you know, we do have to think. One thing we have to be very vigilant about is the fact that these boards that go in these phones are becoming harder and harder. Like we actually have been looking into, if we wanted to make a Futo phone that we could actually get GrapheneOS running on well. It's a total pain in the ass. They put it on stock pixels now. You get like this bootloader warning, right? They're working on making these chips so that, you know, the signing key, they're gonna be using the security features that you know, Apple can they will make it so that you cannot even run anything on this phone unless it's signed by a powerful company like Google or, you know, the people who made the computer. So we got to make sure that doesn't happen. We got to get good phones that don't have this.
This is being done.
Yeah.
Tell children. It's like, look, a big evil magician is trying to take away this phone, the magic that's in it, away from you and control it. And when you explain it that way, kids get it. So like, kids, fight for your mobile devices, for your future, for your freedom, for your sovereignty, for your ability to function. Because
fight for the green bubble.
Yeah, fight for the green bubble. Yeah, because your future is digital. It's purely digital, right? We're already there. It's your life is digital, and it's a feudal system, right? We have two feudal overlords. You have King Apple and you have Duke Google, right? And you, as a peasant, you can choose which fief lord is going to rule over you and extract 30% out of your rent.
And 100% out of your privacy.
And 100% of your privacy. So, yeah, okay, you can choose your oppressor, but I'd rather not have an oppressor. Like, not at all.
Yeah, I mean, and just to kind of make it more clear what I was trying to say earlier, you know, they're trying to do what video game consoles have done, which is like very hard to get, you know, a game published on a PlayStation without Sony approving your game.
Isn't it possible?
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't follow how much they do try to crack these things, and like Xbox, you know, I'm not sure like if the original Xbox has even been cracked quite yet without like a physical modification. So they're doing this to your hardware, and when they do that to your hardware, like you don't want like to your general purpose computer, we don't want that happening. We want to be able to install whatever software we want on our computers. And if you want to have the security feature where only the software that, you know, the manufacturer wants on it is there, you know, and you know that happened, that's possible to do. And then you get more security. But if you should be able to choose to break that, like open up the back of your phone, flip a switch, and now it's less secure, but you can put what you want on it. Like that needs to be, that should be an essential feature of every piece of hardware, and we're moving in the opposite direction. Let's plug Circles. Like, tell us about Circles. Tell us about how Circles is a great project.
Sure. Yeah. So Circles is this thing I've been wanting for a long time and finally started building a couple years ago. The idea is to combine basically the ease of use and kind of like the user interface of something like Facebook, with the security and privacy that you get from something more like Signal Private Messenger or Matrix or one of these other encrypted apps. And so underneath it, it's just Matrix, which is a nice distributed end-to-end encrypted messaging system. And on the top, you get a nice, familiar, friendly social interface, so you can scroll through and see what your friends have been up to, browse their timelines. You can post stuff to your different timelines. We've got kind of like the Facebook wall interface. We've got private group interface, and built into it is a secure encrypted cloud photo gallery. And because it's built on Matrix, you can run your own server, be totally independent of anybody else. And then what we're adding now is the ability to do in-app payments and subscriptions through Apple and Google. And so if you don't want to bother with all that and be your own sysadmin, you want the easy normie path, we'll be your sysadmin. You can have an account on our server and you just pay us a couple bucks a month.
Cool. So in your beta's in the Play Store now, right?
We have a beta in the Play Store, yeah. So we can share the link to that.
So
people can try it out.
Is there a reason why? Was it harder to get into the App Store on iOS, or was it just?
We never quite made it into the App Store on iOS.
Okay.
I was very close. So I was gonna do in-app subscriptions. They say don't turn on your subscriptions until you get approved to come in the store. So I said, okay, and so I submit it to the store, and they're like, you don't have your subscriptions enabled. And so and then got distracted and had to do some other things in life. And then once we got the beta started up again, we hit some problems with some software that we're now rewriting. So the iOS version is coming. But from what I've seen, getting into the Google Play Store beta has been a little bit easier than getting into the Apple beta.
And then we were able to test it really easily. You just gave us an APK that we could just install on our phones. And,
yeah, we were
testing it that way.
We set up our own F-Droid repo. I didn't even know you could do that. I wasn't much of an F-Droid user, but now I know you can do it, and we have our own repo for the beta. So if you use F-Droid, you can just go install us as a new software source. And then because it's F-Droid, it's nice and open and standards compliant and easy. It's just a bunch of files on a web server. And so for the people like Aaron who don't want to deal with having a new repo, I just go grab the link to the APK in the repo and send it to him, and he installs from there, and it works.
Well, it's been a real pleasure, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Till later.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks.